Welcome to the tale of the worst job I've ever had to work. I won't use the establishment's real name. I'll just call it Blue. I worked at a tavern called Blue. And the Tavern Blue that I worked at was essentially a place that my mom had gotten me a job at. Because I said that I wanted to get a job. I wanted to have my own money. Well, my mother decided that Blue was the place that I should work. That was the only place I was allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to go work anywhere else. I was to work at the Tavern Blue. Because that is where she worked. She also worked there, like, off and on my entire life. She would, that's one of the jobs she had when I was a kid. Okay, fine. I go there, and the first night they put me is the busiest night of the week, which was all-you-can-eat chicken night. Okay, fine. Nobody told me anything. I was just expected to know. I didn't work at, the bar or anything. I wasn't old enough to do that. I worked in the back room in the kitchen. Well, essentially, while I was there, they are very fond of screaming. Everyone there, very fond of screaming. The owners were mean as hell, to the point where you're, afraid to ask a question. And it had a lot of cleanliness issues. I noticed very quickly that a lot of the food was being touched with ungloved hands. I'd seen the fry cook on more than one occasion drop food on the floor and just pick it back up and put it in the fryer and stick it on the plate again. They would change how something was supposed to be made a lot, and then if you didn't know the new way, you would be screamed at. My personal favorite instance of this was there was a pizza box, which had all the pizza toppings in it. So, the sausage, pepperoni, the bell peppers, that kind of thing. Well, my job was to swap out the stuff in the box every night. And at the end of the night, I was swapping out the bell peppers, and the lead cook screamed at me and told me, "It's fine, just fucking leave it. Just leave it. I told you to leave it." Okay, but the bell peppers in the thing, they look a little old, a little squishy. Shouldn't I get rid of them? I said it was fine. Okay. So I put the box back in the freezer, or fridge, back in the fridge. And the next night, the manager, or the guy who owns the place, I'll call him Daryl. Okay. Daryl is a man probably in his 60s. Daryl comes into the kitchen. He calls a staff meeting with all of the waitresses and all of the cooks. And then he pulls out the pizza box where the peppers have now gone squishy. You pick them up and they're like mashed potatoes. And looks at me directly and walks up to me screaming, "Does this look like it is fucking okay to you? Does this look like it's okay to serve to you?" Picks it up and flings it in my face and said, "If you didn't know what the fuck you were doing, you should have asked the lead cook." So essentially, he was making an example of me in front of everybody else. And as a kid, I was too terrified to actually say anything. I said something later when there wasn't 20 eyes on me. But that was very common, was for me to be pulled aside and screamed at. Waitresses would take orders, and I would be screamed at because they would order a baked potato. And if I put sour cream and butter on it just automatically, they would scream at me, "Well, they didn't order sour cream. Don't put it on there." But when they would give me a ticket and it didn't have sour cream, I wouldn't put it, and then I would be screamed at because I didn't put it. So no matter what I did, I would be screamed at. And I wanted to leave that job so bad because that job made me cry so often. And they, the two cooks that were in there with me, they would leave all the time. They would go outside at the busiest point because they decided they had enough. And then I would be left to run the fryer, the griddle, and do all of the plating. And then my mom would guilt trip me into staying at this job, despite the fact that I was also being paid significantly less than everyone else in that kitchen. Everyone else in that kitchen was getting paid $12 an hour. I was being paid $8 an hour. Okay, so I was being paid $8 an hour to be screamed at every night and guilt tripped. And then when I did finally quit, I went to a different job. I went and worked at like a retail store. My mother guilt tripped me into going back, saying that I made the 60-year-old man and woman who owned the place cry. So I ended up having to go back for a couple more months until one of them yelled at my grandfather. Which then, since they yelled at my grandfather, my mother said that I had to quit right now. So it's fine that they scream and yell at me. You got beef when they scream and yell at Grandpa. Okay, fine. Whatever, as long as I get to leave this hell. So I quit, and then my mom, for whatever reason, ended up forgiving them and going back anyway and tried to get me to go back. And there was no way I was going back. I was not. But I still hate that place. And I had to drive by it every time for years. And I once heard that there was a fire in the location it was, and I had like my fingers crossed that it was blue. Please tell me blue went down. Nope. It was a building next to it. I was a little disappointed. But blue, like, along with like all of the like horrible managers and the people who worked there, I would have to leave like the back room of the kitchen and walk through like the tavern area to go get like warmers and stuff. And when I did that, legitimately, I would have to deal with this drunk guy who would come over and start pulling on my apron strings. And I would tell him to leave me alone, and he would continue to pull on my apron strings. And the owner would do nothing and would just tell me to tolerate it. Yeah, sure, I'm going to tolerate this random man pulling on my apron. Thanks. I'm just telling you now. It doesn't matter how old you are. Go to a job that treats you with some kind of respect.